Coming at number 10, we have make your own playground. Here's something I never considered for an abandoned playground. You take a place that is abandoned and then you turn it into a playground. YouTuber Katie McDonald took her crew of parkour and trick skill professionals who range from slackliners to skateboarders, and then she went to an abandoned shipyard to make it into a place where you could have some fun. Well, they call it fun because they seem like the thrill-seeking type, but this kind of stuff makes me want to curl up into a ball and wish I was back at home. Just take a look at this clip. Yeah, they are definitely making the most fun out of that place, but I think if I was slacklining over an empty warehouse and the fall would mean I would splat on the ground like an old tomato getting kicked against a brick wall, I would be clenching that rope like you're clenching your bumhole when you're stuck in traffic and you gotta poo. Alright, coming in at number 9, we have the abandoned Burger King. Now this one isn't the scariest one on the list at first glance. It honestly took me a second to get a real chill from this place, but once you look at it for long enough, it really starts to feel eerie. YouTuber Abandoned Underground went through a Burger King that had been abandoned and took a look at the play place. And the place hasn't been left for so long that it's become a rusted mess, but it looks like it's been sitting there for at least a few years. When you just take a quick peek at it, it just seems empty, like it would look after it was closed. But the fact that it's daytime makes it feel so much creepier and cursed. It feels like it was pulled right out of a zombie movie. Like this would be the scene where the guy walks into the Burger King and no one's in there, but he still doesn't know what's going on. Then eventually he explores and some zombie jumps out and starts eating his face. Coming at number 8, we have Luna Park in France. Playgrounds don't always mean a slide and a couple swings. When you get into the big leagues, you start to take kids to amusement parks, which I absolutely love. Roller coasters are one of my most favorite things in the world. You just get tossed around, you feel the shot of adrenaline go through your body as you rush down the tracks. It truly is amazing. Now, what happened at Luna Park in France would have for sure given you a shot of adrenaline, but not the kind that you would be looking for. There was a massive accident that happened on one of these rides, and it took place on one of the scariest rides ever built. Known mostly as the slingshot, it's a ride that fires you into the air with what seems like massive bungee cables that sit on either side of a cage that you're sitting in. Well, on the way down, one of the cables snapped and the cage smashed into one of the large metal beams that hold the ride in place. This caused one of the people inside to break their leg. Not to mention they were stuck in there for over an hour while they waited to be rescued by firefighters. I don't think this was the thrill that they were looking for. Coming in at number 7, we have Katie Strikes Again. The first place we put on this list was with Katie turning an abandoned building into a playground, but that wasn't the only time that she did this. She actually has done this quite a few times, and I thought we should share another one because they're all pretty amazing, and they do scare the hell out of me. This time, her and her crew of thrill seekers ended up on a massive abandoned ship. The ship itself looked cool as hell, and there should be no surprise that they were successful to turn it into an abandoned playground. Dude, I wish I could do that. She climbs up there so quickly and then just takes off running. I would be wheezing so hard if I could even make it to the top of that thing. Coming in at number 6, we have the Marching Men. The thing about a playground is once it gets left behind, the pieces just stay there. People don't come in and clean it up afterwards. It just stays a hulking mess in the middle of nowhere, and then you get pictures like this. I couldn't find out exactly where in the world this was taken from, but it really creeps me out. These marching men look like they were just brought to life and they're gonna rise out of the water and come kill us. It's like that episode of Simpsons where they go to Itchy and Scratchy Land and all the robots get a thirst for murder and they start killing everyone. How do they save the day in that episode? I think I should rewatch it just in case that becomes our reality. Coming in at number 5, we have Exploring with CF. Going to some of these places is like taking a peek at what the world would look like after climate change kills us all and we have a shell of our former civilization. This is the vibe I got from our next point. I pulled it from the YouTube page Exploring with CF, and the park itself isn't that spooky. I mean, it's dangerous because it's all run down with a bunch of rust on everything. One wrong move and you could have a jagged piece of metal stab right through your arm and then just bleed out on the ground. But what freaked me out about this is how end of the world the whole video feels. I mean, the host is wearing a backpack and hiking boots and kinda looks like he's ready for the world to collapse. It's almost like, was this video taken in a timeline where the world fell apart and everything is like The Last of Us? Coming in at number 4, we have Holy Land USA. It should be no surprise that there was a Christian Christianity theme park in the good old US of A that opened up in 1950, and it should be no surprise that for 30 years this place was massively popular. Really, the place was a huge hit until the owner died, and then a whole bunch of creepy stuff started happening. There was a dead body found on the ground in the theme park, and there were rumors that the whole place was cursed. Yeah, no thank you. I don't need to go check that out anytime soon. Coming at number 3, we have a whole lot of jungle gym. If you're wondering how our grandparents were able to get that old man strength, this is how. Because they would spend their whole childhood doing chin-ups on one of these bad boys. You know how strong you will get as a kid if you're running around on one of these mini gyms? You will get equally as strong as the amount of head injuries you get from falling off of that thing. That's the new law I just made up. The playground will make you as strong as it makes you dumb. Coming in at number 2, we have One More Time with Katie. Okay, this is the last Katie McDonald video on the list, but they are so high quality, I almost think that 3 is not enough. For this abandoned playground, her and her crew went off to an amusement park in Cleethorpes in the United Kingdom. Okay, this one, even though I don't think I have the upper body strength to be able to climb and do those things, it does seem like a lot of fun. It makes me want to go up there and climb and run around on those slides, but if I did do that, that place would for sure be cursed, because I would fall to my death, and then my stubborn ghost would be floating around that place until the end of time. Coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the Bulblo Amusement Park. And what better way to follow up our last point and fill out the number 1 spot on this list than another amusement park that has been forgotten. This place was open for nearly 100 years, but has been forgotten since the year 1993. The place was shut down when one of the owners was nearly killed in a car accident. Since then, there's been a looming feeling of misfortune around the whole place. This is a place you shouldn't go check out unless you're looking for something creepy to keep you up at night.
Starting us off with number 10 is the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Located in West Virginia, the beautiful estate opened up in 1863 and was originally meant to house 250 people, but ended up housing close to 2,500. The asylum was problematic from day one. I mean, it had a separate wing just for black people. Either way, by 1881 it was disastrous. The hospital was infested with patients, rooms meant for one now housed 4 or 5 people, and the farm and dairy couldn't even meet the demand of so many people, and patients soon began to starve and their mental conditions declined. Patients were uncontrollable, they wouldn't listen to the staff. Most wild patients were actually locked up in cages to save space and just save the staff. When investigating the hospital, a reporter found a body cooler open with a body inside. They found patients sleeping on the floor and freezing due to lack of heat. Sanitation was at an all-time low, and by the time the place closed, its cemetery had been expanded to 666 acres to make space for all the dying people. When visitors go there now, they can feel the rage, they can feel the bad energy in the air. The asylum was abandoned and nothing was removed from the inside, so it looks exactly as it did when all this was going on. Ripped wallpaper from the patients, visitors have even seen the wallpaper peeling off in front of their eyes. Screams and howls from different wings of the building, cages rattling like someone was taking their anger out on them. It was a lot. It is a lot. Coming in at number 9 is Old Changi Hospital. Now this one just legit looks like the set of the horror movie from my nightmares. Crumbling corridors, peeling wallpaper. The abandoned hospital located in Singapore was built way back in 1935. It was used for the British ARF, and when they withdrew 7 years later, the Japanese used it as a prison camp for British soldiers and anyone they deemed to be anti-Japanese. It's said the Japanese secret police had their base there and were known to be ruthless. Many prisoners were tortured tirelessly till they died. Some say they used to impale the severed heads of prisoners on stakes and put them out in public. It was bought in 2006 to be turned into a resort, but that fell through. Some say it was because of financial troubles, while others blame it on the hauntings. Visitors have heard screaming on the property and seen shadow people during the night and day. Some have even seen the apparitions of bloody soldiers walking through the hall, and the creepiest one for me by far is the ghost of a little boy that just sits and stares into the distance. A movie was shot in the hospital and the cast and crew said they heard loud noises and voices and saw a floating woman with a black aura. Groups that go in there tend to have a member disappear, and when they reappear, they all tell the same story. They were following another member away from the group to a desolate part of the hospital when a figure would come and tell them they should never return. Upon exiting the hospital, that member would just disappear completely. I'm getting cringes, I'm getting goosebumps. At number 8 we have Beachworth Asylum. Located in Victoria, Beachworth was surrounded by 106 hectares of farmland, making it self-sufficient for one, but also extremely isolated for two. And it was very easy to get put into Beachworth. All it literally took was a signature from a doctor saying you were unstable, and in you went, my friend. If you went in there, chances are you stayed in there till you died. Only a third of the patients actually ended up getting out. Physicians who worked at the hospital always spoke about brutal treatments, very troubled patients, and no hope of escape for anyone. It opened in 1867, and during its 128 years of being open, around 9,000 patients died on the property. Treatments involved isolation cages, straitjackets, restraint chairs, lobotomies, and electroshock treatments. People who go there have seen the ghost of a young girl who tries to communicate with you in any and all means possible. They've seen the ghost of Nurse Matron Sharp in the halls as well. But the Gravilla wing, where the electroshock therapy took place, is especially creepy. Visitors report feeling icy cold in that area, and that a woman was pushed out of a window in that ward because another patient wanted her cigarettes. People have reported seeing her body on the ground where it fell all those years ago. Others have heard children laughing. One visitor's son was found talking to himself, and when asked who he was talking to, he said James, a little boy that lives at the asylum. Filling at number 7 slot is the Athens Lunatic Asylum. Contrary to popular belief, this one is located in Ohio, not Athens, Greece. It opened its doors in 1874 and housed violent criminals, children, war vets, etc., and performed lobotomies on the daily pretty much. It was known for lobotomies, and that is not a good look, my friend. A lot of employees were trained to do these kind of procedures, but a lot of them weren't. The asylum's first ever patient was a 12-year-old girl with epilepsy who was thought to be possessed by a demon. I'm so glad our mental health knowledge has developed this much that it doesn't happen anymore. Like, we can't have that. The asylum itself was beautiful, you know, it had gardens, livestock, a dairy. It was like a retirement home, not a hospital. All patient and staff information was kept strictly under wraps, and it stayed mysterious, like you can't even access any information about who was there unless you file paperwork with the state of Ohio. 1,930 people were buried on the property, but if you thought you could find out their identities that way, you're wrong. Each headstone is simply marked with a number and nothing else. Rumors of staff killing patients were rife because of that, and these rumors weren't helped by the fact that in 1978 a female patient disappeared only to be found dead in an abandoned ward ages later. Even till this day you can see the stain on the ground where her corpse was. I feel like I'm gonna be making this face after every story. Now at number 6 is Taunton State Hospital. This type of hospital was kind of like a self-contained city, and honestly the architecture was gorgeous. It looks like the estate of a very wealthy British man that wears a monocle. It was meant to give patients a chance at occupational therapies, you know, let them have fresh air instead of isolating them in dark small rooms. Built in 1854, the psychiatric hospital has a very colourful history. They used to do frontal lobotomies often. In the 1870s, they used to put patients in water tanks and then put them in extreme cold to try and shock them out of their ailment. Later on, electric shock therapy was used on thousands of patients. Jane Toppin, a sociopathic serial killer, was one of its most infamous patients. And if you don't know who Jane is, she confessed to killing at least 31 patients while working as a nurse. Fantastic. And it said staff at the hospital used to conduct satanic rituals in the basement. They used to take patients down there and they were never seen again. Most of the buildings closed down by 1978 and became a mental health facility for convicted juveniles, but 97% of staff said the conditions of the hospital put everyone at risk. They didn't go into what they meant by conditions. Did they mean the decrepitness of it all? Did they mean the hauntings? Staff later came out saying they always felt uneasy uneasy on the property, especially if they went near the basement. One was even driving back there at night and saw screaming patients in the windows that weren't there. Coming in at number 5 is Knockton Hall. Located in England, during World War I it was used as a home for wounded American officers, but by World War II it was a military hospital. By 1957 it was open to the general public and closed down around 48 years later. However, things were bad, but not when it was a hospital, when it was a home. It's said the ghost of a young girl roams the hall and enjoys being in one bedroom in particular. Staff staying in that room used to get woken up at 4:30 a.m. every night by a young girl crying by their bed. She would say things like a devilish man had done this to her and other things like that. The story claims the ghost is a servant girl who became pregnant after being with the owner's son, and he then later murdered her. The apparition of a grey lady has also been seen around the hall, but God knows who the hell she is, but she's there. At number 4 is the Ararat Lunatic Asylum. Said to be Australia's most haunted building, this mental institution is the largest abandoned asylum on the continent. It opened its doors in 1867 and 100 people died yearly, whether they were staff, patients, or prisoners. Now you're probably like, what do you mean prisoners? Ararat used to house the most criminally insane, evil people in the country, and it was also a place for people suffering from mental illness. It used to house around 1,000 patients and 500 staff members, and in the 130 years that it was open, there were around 13,000 deaths. These days the asylum is used for ghost tours, and boy, oh boy, is this place haunted. Visitors have been known to faint unexpectedly, have waves of nausea and pain hit them out of nowhere, and methodical banging sounds can be heard everywhere, and it's most likely the sounds of patients hitting their heads against walls. I mean, the dead patients. But the J ward is where it gets bad. The J ward housed the asylum's most infamous patients like Bill Wallace. Bill shot his friend over a cigarette and then was declared insane. He died there after being held there for 67 years. Another one was Gary Webb, who mutilated himself 70 times and would say nothing but shout, "Get out." When guests go into J ward, they feel like they're being shoved and bitten. The sound of ticking clocks, the desperate shrieking, the shouts of someone saying "get out." It's literally an invite to hell. Get out? Boy, you do not need to tell me twice. You don't even have to tell me once. You won't even find me in there. Filling our number 3 slot is Penhurst State School and Hospital. Previously known as the Eastern Pennsylvania State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic. What a mouthful. The hospital opened its doors in 1908 and housed around 10,000 people and went through 79 years of controversy before officially shutting down. The campus was literally huge. It could have been a mini town on its own. It even had its own railroad. Patients sent there were seen as too unfit for citizenship, and the commission did not want them to intermix their genes with the general population. The hospital's chief physician believed every person in there could have been a potential criminal. The hospital's reputation declined rapidly when many residents came out saying they had been neglected and abused. 9 employees were charged for slapping and beating patients, many wheelchair-bound, and forcing patients to assault each other. Patients would have unexplained bruises on them from the staff, and it was horrible. Nowadays, many of the buildings have been torn down, but paranormal activity is rife. Voices, footsteps, screams, abrupt temperature changes, wheelchairs moving on their own, items thrown out of nowhere. It's like the building and the spirits are just working together to show you how bad they used to have it. Audio recordings have picked up on voices saying things like "go away" and "I'll kill you" and "why won't you leave?" Need I say more? I don't think I need to. Now at number 2 is Coon Memorial Hospital. This has to be one of Mississippi's most haunted buildings for sure. The hospital was open for well over a century before being closed down in 1989. When it initially opened, it was for the smallpox outbreak, but later tended to Civil War soldiers, and then later the yellow fever outbreak. Well, we have a lot of outbreaks as a species, don't we? The hospital itself is a maze of rooms and walls. Some are knocked down, most are spray painted, it's just a whole mess. And despite being abandoned pretty much right after it closed, many paranormal teams have been inside and have seen shadow figures climbing up the walls. Yes, up the walls, and not just floating around the hallways, up the walls. Their cameras captured disembodied voices saying, "Oh my god," and the voice of a little girl saying, "Want to come play with me? Why do dead kids always want to play? I don't want to play with you, like leave me alone." The worst discovery happened in 2015 where a group of ghost hunters ventured into the hospital to check it out. You know, adrenaline junkies, I don't know, I don't get it. Now they ended up finding the murdered body of a missing woman near the entrance, but her blood trails indicated she had come from inside. Her body had been dragged from the second floor in the middle of the hospital to a grassy area outside. Most of her blood was found on the steps. I just need a minute to comprehend this. And finally, at number 1 is Gonjiam Hospital. Located in South Korea, it's said to be one of the most haunted buildings in the country. I mean, CNN even called it the freakiest place in the world. The hospital was randomly and abruptly closed in the 1990s, and people only really found out why ages afterwards. They weren't making money, the conditions were beyond unsanitary, there was no proper sewage disposal, and worst of all, a lot of the doctors themselves were mentally ill and the patients were murderous. All in all, it's just not a good mix. The story goes that patients and staff alike would randomly die without cause and would later be found at their desks or in their beds. It said a doctor on the staff was mentally ill and he was the one killing everyone inside. The bad juju they left behind was so bad that visitors who go in there have come out screaming after hearing moans and seeing shadows and being scratched by nails that aren't even there.
Starting off this countdown, we have Ruby, Arizona. Established in 1910, Ruby used to be a popular mining town. Now it's a popular and well-preserved ghost town. The population of this area started off small, but over the years it gradually increased. At its peak, it had a population of about 1,200 residents. Now, since the population number was so small, they really didn't have a proper law enforcement system. In fact, a lot of families were scared to live there. Between 1920 to 1922, Ruby and the surrounding area was the scene of 3 double homicides, known as the Ruby murders. In 1920, 2 brothers were found shot in their store. One with a bullet in his head and his back, the other brother had been shot through his left eye. Then in 1921, the store's new owner was attacked, killed, and their store was robbed. Then in 1940, the mine closed down, and the next year the town was pretty much abandoned. Coming in at number 9, we have New Idria, California. New Idria was once another popular mining area. However, over the years, mercury has been seeping into the water and ground, contaminating it. It's considered way too toxic for people to live there. On top of the mercury problem, they also have an asbestos problem. So yeah, EPA declared it not a safe area to be in, let alone live in. In our 8th spot, we have Tawerga, Libya. Back in 2011, residents of this town were forced to leave by resistance forces. Buildings were burnt and ransacked, and people's possessions were thrown about, littering the streets. There once was 30,000 people living there. Now it's home to no one, and the residents are never allowed to return home. This is one of the places you literally can't visit. The whole area is defended by a small military. You probably will be killed if you try to visit this area. Also, good luck finding it. Its main road is now erased from road signs, and there's no directional arrows telling you where to go. All that's left of this place are destroyed homes and lone cats and dogs. Moving on at number 7, we have Pyramiden, Norway, or as it is now called, the Soviet ghost town in the Arctic Circle. So way up in the Arctic Circle is Pyramiden. Probably said that wrong, I apologize. A once popular mining town. During World War II, this mining town was very successful. However, it fell following the downfall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. Then the town was the site of a tragic accident. A plane crashed in the area, killing some of the residents. After that incident, the town could no longer support its residents, and by 1998, it was deserted. Nowadays, thanks to the cold climate, the town is pretty much preserved. The buildings are still in place. Nowadays, thanks to the cold climate, the town is pretty much preserved. The buildings are still in place, and homes look like they are ready to welcome families back. but no one wants to step foot in an area where such a big tragedy occurred. In our 6th spot, we have Ujiapu. Referred to as China's Manhattan, Ujiapu was created to be a center for world trade and finance. But more than 22 buildings are still unfinished, and there's no citizens working inside the big tall buildings. A cab driver described the area as being completely empty, and he says it's 10 times creepier at night. There's a bunch of brightly lit roads, but no one is driving on them. He claims that one time he was driving down the road when he saw headlights coming towards his car, as if a car was going to crash into him head on. He braced for impact, but nothing hit him. When he looked back, there was nothing there. So what were the lights that he saw? He has no idea, but now he thinks that the area is haunted. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Forlandia, Brazil. In 1927, Henry Ford thought it would be a good idea to create a massive rubber plantation in the jungles of Brazil. He named it Fordlandia. He designed the town to have swimming pools, a golf course, and bungalows. He hoped to get a lot of rubber from the trees of the Amazon for car tires and such. But unfortunately, his whole plan failed. The trees ended up getting a leaf fungus and then they died. Then his team and him kept getting into multiple disputes with the Brazilian laborers. So in 1945, he canceled the plans and sold it to the Brazilian government. All that remains are a couple of structures overgrown by nature. In our 4th spot, we have Pitcher, Oklahoma. Pitcher, Oklahoma was once a popular lead and zinc mining town. In fact, it was home to a number of families. But in the mid-90s, a third of the younger population suffered from lead poisoning, and they were experiencing cognitive issues, but they kind of just ignored that and continued living there until 2006. That's when it was discovered that 80% of the buildings were pretty much going to collapse at any time. In fact, one motorist died after driving into a huge hole in the ground. After they discovered that, the population dropped to only 20 people. People fled like crazy. They got the heck out of there. In our 3rd spot, we have Sanchi Pod City. Located just outside of New Taipei, this city is filled with pretty weird styled homes. These homes literally look like UFO pods stacked on top of each other. In fact, it has been nicknamed the UFO houses. So construction of the city began in 1978, and it was meant to be like a vacation resort area. But a lot of bad things happened in the area, which stopped construction. Several fatal car accidents occurred near the construction sites, and then they lost a lot of investments. So the whole thing just came tumbling down. Now it's said that the area is cursed with bad luck. This is because they bisected a Chinese dragon statue near the front gates. By doing so, it's bad luck, and that's why the project was never finished. In our 2nd spot, we have Kentubek, Uzbekistan, otherwise known as Asbestos Island. This area was where biological weapons were being tested out. One of the labs there worked with smallpox and the bubonic plague. In 1971, 10 people on the island contracted smallpox, and 3 died as a result of the testings. Then in 1988, when they banned biological weapons, they buried tons of anthrax spores in the area. In fact, it was considered the world's largest anthrax dumping grounds. Over the years, there have been attempts to decontaminate the area, but they still believe it's way too hazardous to live there. As a result, it lays abandoned. And in our number 1 spot, we have Ipetuan, Argentina. Ipetuan was once known as a perfect spa destination with its therapeutic thermal waters. In fact, since the lake was so rich in minerals, it was used to treat certain skin conditions, muscle pain, joint inflammation, and diabetes. But sadly, the area was hit hard with a bunch of rainstorms and floods. Following this, a dam broke which was protecting the area, and tons of water poured in. Residents said that they woke up to ankle-deep water in their home. The water level rose a centimeter each hour. 2 weeks later, it was 3 meters deep. By 1993, it was 10 meters deep. The village became uninhabitable and abandoned. It's said that the residents never fully recovered from the trauma of losing everything literally overnight. It's so sad. Now there are attempts to rebuild the area, but chances are nobody is going to move back to an area where the same thing could happen again.
Coming in at number 10, we have Tallahassee Mall, Tallahassee, Florida. Here's one that's holding on by the skin of its teeth. In fact, this mall was shut down in 2011, but a company saw this as a great opportunity to get some money and they bought back up the lease. So this place should be abandoned, but someone out there thought a dying mall was a great investment. I don't know what was going on through their head. If I was trying to make some profit, I don't think I would look at a place that is being propped up by GameSpot and Toys R Us. I'm sure post-COVID that this mall just got launched into the dust and the whole area is just a wasteland. Coming at number 9, we have the Northbridge Mall, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The YouTubers Proper People love to go around and explore abandoned buildings, and malls are no exception. They usually go through the states to find new places to explore, and this time they were heading through a mall and ran into some pretty interesting things. The whole place is blown out. Looks like a bomb went off. All the windows are smashed in and everything is ripped out of the stores. They should really rent this thing for horror movies because the whole thing has like an end of the world vibe. Certain areas of the roof were caved in, and I think there's broken glass on every inch of that mall. At one point they get confronted by a security guard who tells them that they need to get out of the broken down mall because apparently they were trespassing. They managed to convince them that they need to go back and get equipment before they leave to keep exploring the mall. So much of the stuff in the mall is dated because it has been closed down for so long. It actually would be fun to go through and pillage out a bunch of the decade-old material to decorate your house. You could give it this pulled out of time vibe. Coming in at number 8, we have the South China Mall. Here's a mall that you might want to stay away from because if you go too deep into it, you might end up missing. Not because there's some crazy serial killer in there who wants to wear your face like a mask. Well, there might be. I haven't done my own investigative work, but just the size of this will blow your mind. The thing is 9 million square feet. Holy cow, that's a massive space that's being used for nothing. The mall was thrown up by a billionaire who got rich with a certain brand of instant noodles. Not a bad idea. Build a mall, you'll be making money off the rent, and then you could sell noodles in the food court. Brilliant! Well, it turns out no one wanted to go to this massive mall because the place shut down not long after it opened. And in case you were wondering, the dude is still a billionaire, which is the kind of rich you want to get to, where you can drop a ton of money making a massive mall and then have it fail and not even worry about it. Coming in at number 7, we have the Steph Lawless Mall. Now I couldn't get the name for this mall because YouTuber Steph Lawless doesn't mention what mall he is visiting in the comments, in the description, or in the video itself, but the whole thing looks like a massive death trap. That looks like a place where you'd find a bunch of dead bodies and then they would come to life and do some sort of weird surgery on you to make them your leader. Well, that got dark quick. But the whole place is completely destroyed and has a terrible vibe. Not the place you want to host a birthday party. Coming in at number 6, we have El Con Center, Tucson, Arizona. Now this mall has a little bit of life left in it, but it's definitely going to die. The thing has slowly been going down like a fat kid down a water slide. He might get stuck a few times, but eventually he will hit the water, and when he does, it's going to be a big splash. The mall had store after store go out of business, and new places aren't that excited to grab a spot in the mall because the whole thing looks like a desolate wasteland. In fact, to save money and make the mall easier to navigate, their owner had part of the mall demolished. He basically had a crew come in and tear down all the stuff that wasn't being used so everyone could get to the last few shops a little bit better. That's like when you get bit by a zombie in a horror movie and they need to cut your arm off so you don't die from the infection and it doesn't spread. But let me tell you, when that happens in the movie, that guy always dies. Except for maybe in like Evil Dead when he gets the cool chainsaw arm. Coming in at number 5, we have the Frederick Town Mall, Maryland. YouTuber Chris Hopkins goes to an abandoned mall in Maryland. Before he gets into the mall, he sees squatters all set up on the outside of the mall, so there's a good chance that some people are using this mall for housing. A lot of the lights are still operating in the mall, so that means that some of the electrical could still be working, which would be awesome because there is a full arcade in this place. But I don't know how long you'd want to hang out in there because while walking through, they came across some swastikas spray painted on the walls with something written in German. That could mean that the place is being used as a Nazi meetup. I don't know how happy they would be to find you in their clubhouse. There was also some dude riding around the mall on a motorcycle popping wheelies. That sounds like a Mad Max gang member circling the mall to see if anyone's on his turf. Coming in at number 4, we have the Dixie Square Mall from Illinois. This mall was actually famous for a short time. Have you guys ever seen the movie The Blues Brothers? Well, if you haven't and you're a fan of music, you should check it out. But the mall was used for some of the movie. Everyone thought this would make the mall skyrocket to success, but it turns out crime is more powerful than fame. The violence in the area eventually led to the mall mall being shut down. Coming in number 3, we have Rolling Acres Mall, Ohio. If you want to see what nature will do to our structures when we are all dead and gone, this is a perfect thing to look at. The Rolling Acres Mall in Ohio stands as a monument to winter winning over man. The mall's roof has been ripped through by the harsh winters that the Ohio climate brings, which is kind of cool. If you visit this place in the wintertime, there will be snow that will pile up in the mall through the roof, and it looks like the area that you go in The Last of Us DLC where the helicopters crash to the roof. I very much like that. Coming in at number 2, the New World Mall, Thailand. If you're working on a building and it doesn't get done, most of the time you would think that it gets torn down. Well, that costs a lot of money too, so sometimes the building will just stand there and not go anywhere, and it just stands as a monument of what could have been. The shell of the New World Mall is pretty impressive. The whole building was supposed to be an 11-story tall mall and was said to be one of the largest malls in the world. It would have been a bustling tourist attraction as well as a place for foreign investors to dump some money into the country. But what ended up happening is partway through the building process, it was discovered that the building crew wasn't following most of the regulations put in place to keep the building safe, and this led to the whole thing being shut down. That was over 40 years ago. A big problem with that was that the builders never finished the roof, so rain started to pool in the basement of the mall. This led to a massive mosquito infestation that would spread out to the surrounding areas. How this was dealt with was fish were released into the water to consume all of the mosquitoes. You can now go down there to see a bunch of cool fish if you want. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the Cropless Shopping Center, Mexico City. The YouTuber Fearless and Far goes to check out one of the coolest abandoned malls I have ever seen in my life. This thing has a whole Greek mythology theme going on, which makes you think that there's going to be a Gorgon in the basement waiting to turn you into stone with her gaze, when in reality it would probably be just some crazy person with scraggly hair who would throw rocks at you. But the whole place was supposed to be in the style of a Middle Eastern bazaar, which is super cool, but the unorthodox style could have added to the reason why it got shut down. But there were also rumors that it was involved in a massive money laundering scam. The building has been shut down for 20 years and now is covered in broken glass and spray paint tags.
Starting us off with number 10 is the Horton Mines. This abandoned mercury mine is in Pershing County, Nevada, and is at the height of 5,400 feet, which is pretty damn high if I do say so myself. Now, back in 2013, Frank Hood from the YouTube channel Exploring Abandoned Mines uploaded a video of him exploring this Horton mine. The mine dates back to the mid-1800s, and Frank has explored hundreds of abandoned mines, but he claimed this one was the creepiest one he's ever been to. And I trust Frank, I've been in 0 mines, he's been in more than 100, so he wins. It starts off with him going into the mine and realizing there's water streaming out of it, which apparently is not a good thing when you come to mines. And the mine is old as hell, there are hanging chains coming down from the roof of it, and just other rusty abandoned mesh equipment. Frank actually refused to fully go into the mine because he was that scared, and he said he felt the sensation that something was watching him. The air just felt sinister, and he didn't seem welcomed into the mine. The camera then pans to the entrance of the cave, and then when it pans back to the tunnel, that's when you see one of the chains swinging back and forth quite a bit. And none of the chains had moved beforehand, so you can tell there's not much wind going in and out of this mine. But this chain was deliberately moving, after which another chain started moving as well, and at that point, Frank was like, peace out, I'm not gonna die by some evil miner ghost today. Me neither. Good on you, Frank.
Coming at number 9, we have Hashima Island, Japan. Coal used to be the biggest thing on the planet. Everyone wanted coal. You could use it in your home, you could use it to make electricity, you could use it to make diamonds. It was the hottest thing on the market. Everyone was working in coal mines. You had grown men going down there to try and make a living for their family, and you had kids going down there to make sure they could make good money and never grow up to be men. There was even birds down there to warn you if toxic gas was coming through and ready to end your life. Well, this fuel was so popular that Japan built a whole city on an island around a coal mine. In the 70s, this place was a hotspot, and families were being moved over there in the boatloads to make this place the new coolest coal mine in the world, and it just might have been for a time. That's until everyone started to switch over to gas. Then the mine's profits started to plummet, and slowly but surely the whole area became a ghost town. Now there's almost nothing there, just the shells of buildings that give off the vibe of a nuclear wasteland. Not really the best place to take your next vacation unless you and your hubby have a thing for desolate landscapes. Alright.
At number 8 we have Wildeck Mine. So back in 2016, Frank Hurd, our MVP of abandoned mines, went to this 150-year-old Wildeck gold mine in Australia. In the video he walks through the tunnels as per normal, but the deeper he gets, the spookier everything becomes. Ooh. Ooh. I hope you were listening to this at night with like some popcorn and like that really added to the soundtrack. Now at one point you can hear what sounds like many people whispering, and you can literally hear it in the video. Now at first Frank thinks it's wind, but you know how wind has this wind sound like whoosh, whoosh. The sound in the video was of ghostly whispers. Wind does not sound like that. Now as soon as he stops walking, the whispers stop as well, and when he continues, the whispers are back louder than ever. Some viewers commented saying they thought it was the sound of demons or some sort of demonic ritual. Another sub said the sound was of the spirits of the miners who had died there. What's creepy to me is that he went to explore this cave on a stormy night. Like, do you not know what happens on stormy nights, Frank? People get killed. That's what happens.
Coming number 7, we have Bodie, California. Being alive during the gold rush would have been a crazy time. I mean, it's kind of like that now with kids trying to get famous on TikTok. You have all of them rushing out to make videos that no one's gonna watch for people who don't care them, all because they don't have any real skills. The gold rush was like that, except you would have to move your whole family hundreds of miles across the country by buggy, and half of you would die along the way, like in the game Oregon Trail. And then you would get to where you're going and you would hope that you would get rich, but you'll probably just end up finding rocks and loneliness. Well, if you want to find a taste of that, head over to Bodie, California. It's amazing to think that people once thought this would be the best place to set up, since it's extremely close to a desert. But it used to be a bustling town with people craving gold more than I crave street fight videos.
Now at number 6 is a Dugan Quarry. Located near the suburbs of Moscow, Dugan Quarry started operating in the 16th century, extracting limestone. And this quarry is massive. It's more than 5,000 meters long, and it's been abandoned for centuries, meaning you can go explore its tunnels for sure, but without a map, your ass is getting lost and dying. The dilapidated quarry has so many old artifacts like the clothes of previous workers, burners where they cooked food. You can even see real sleepers, which is so creepy. Like, how could anyone have slept there? The structure of the mine is also complicated as hell, so you actually shouldn't go in without a professional guide. It looks like it's gonna fall on top of you any second because all the passages are made out of stone. Just stone. Where's the cement? Where's the earthquake proof like bendy?
Coming in at number 5, we have Cody, British Columbia. Now let's jet over to my home province of British Columbia. It's known for being beautiful with lush green forest and mountains so high they look like they were pulled out of Lord of the Rings. And nature has taken back what used to be the town of Cody, British Columbia. The place was booming in the 1800s because 5 separate mines were discovered in the area. This brought in a bunch of jobs and an equal amount of people. It would seem that the money would never stop, but come turn of the century, everything started to dry up when people's values changed and the mine life was no longer as profitable. The town was trying to stay afloat, but a massive fire in the 1940s would seal the deal for this forgotten relic. Now trees and green have enveloped the shell of this former township.
At number 4 is Tallahassee. Yeah, that was a mouthful, but then again any German word usually is. Located in the German city of Essen, this coal mine first became operational in 1834 and is actually under UNESCO protection. Some of its quarries would turn into mining museums after the mine shut down in 1986. The mine is open to the public since it attracts a lot of tourism. It has the artifacts, the history, the culture. It's bloody called Tallahassee, for God's sake. I mean, I would go there just to say it over and over again. Tallahassee. Remix that. But many industrialists who have visited the mine claim to have heard abnormal knocks down there. Tourists have also heard unexplainable faint sounds of men and their tools at work, making it sound like active work is still going on when it isn't and hasn't for centuries. You know what that sounds like? Tallahassee.
Coming in at number 3, we have Louis Mine, Morocco. Sometimes what's left behind will show you how powerful the human spirit can be. The Louis Mine looks like a sheer test of willpower as it's carved into the side of a mountain. It was controlled by the French for nearly 30 years while Morocco was under French control. After the French left, however, the mine fell into disarray as it was never the intention of the Moroccan people to create a mine there. What's left is a ghost town that hovers in the air like a fortress propped up by stone.
Now at number 2 is Kamioka Mine. So this abandoned mine is located in a ghost town of the same name in Japan. Founded in the 19th century, it was the country's leading source of zinc and it used to be one of the largest mines in East Asia. Scientists found a lot of cadmium ore deposits, so the place was mined till the 80s. After that and the overall closing of industrial ore production, the village and mine both became deserted. The tunnels are honestly super eerie. The whole labyrinth is just there in ruins, which attracts a lot of urban explorers. Now all the mines are located at least 1 kilometer under the surface and a lot of the rooms are actually flooded. The dripping water and rust is everywhere, making the mine look super sinister. It actually reminds me of this horror movie that I watched called Creep. It's like German and British, and these people discover this underground network of tunnels and a serial killer lives inside and then he obviously ends up killing everyone. You know how it is. Now the middle of the 20th century brought about a problem with this mine. Mining camp residents started getting sick with diseases unknown to any scientists. Turns out the vapor of cadmium salt soaked into the earth of the island, making people sick. That's a messed up.
Coming at the number 1 spot, we have the Serbian Ice Mine, a mine that has caught some notoriety for its frosty decor. I can't imagine something I would want to explore less. Something with a rocky floor, ice all over the walls, it's dark all the time, there's bugs and rodents everywhere, and the temperature is below freezing. Yeah, that sounds like a great first date spot. With all that being said, the frozen mine does look spectacular in some ways. The ice formations that have been built up from the slow water drips have left what looks like the jaws of a massive beast at the entrance of this underground warehouse. If you don't have a trained eye, you might think that those are massive stalactites and stalagmites, but it's actually just a whole bunch of ice. At least then you don't have to worry about breaking them when you come to visit. If you venture deeper into this mine, you will see that the ice shows no mercy, as frozen bats have been glued to the ceiling. When you start to see animals that have frozen to death and now their corpses are stuck on the walls like decorations, I think it would be time to turn around.
Starting off this countdown, we have Eastern State Penitentiary. Built in 1829, Eastern State Penitentiary was known for housing some of the biggest criminals, such as Al Capone. The conditions in this prison weren't the best. Prisoners were kept in complete solitude, seeing nobody else besides the guards. Whenever they would leave their cell, guards would cover their heads so that they couldn't see anyone else and no one could see them. That alone would drive them insane. But they didn't stop there. The guards would often torture the inmates by soaking them in cold water and then letting them dry outside during the winter time. The prison closed in 1971 and now apparently the ghost of the prisoners haunt the walls, seeking revenge on the guards. In our 9th spot, we have Atlanta Prison Farm. The Atlanta Prison Farm, also known as the Honor Farm, first opened its doors in around 1918. The plan for this prison was for criminals to work off their sentences by doing labor work. This was only for the prisoners that were deemed trustworthy enough. In fact, they really believed that this would be a solid plan, so there were hardly any security. However, it didn't turn out to be such a good idea. There were a lot of gangs at this prison, which resulted in a lot of prisoners getting hung and killed. The prison closed its doors in 1995. But in October of 2009, a fire burnt a large section of the prison. Firefighters didn't even care at all. They didn't try to even attempt to extinguish the fire. Now what remains of the prison is badly vandalized, and pictures of the inside show that it's not the safest place to visit. In our 8th spot, we have HM Pentridge Prison. Her Majesty's Prison Pentridge, or HM Prison Pentridge, was an Australian prison established in 1851. Now the problem with this prison was that it was meant to hold 650 prisoners and only 100 guards. But soon the prison became overcrowded with thousands of prisoners. In fact, a large percentage of the prison population died inside the prison. This was due to monthly stabbings, bludgeonings, and bashings. The prison closed on May 1st, 1997 due to a bunch of riots and scandals. But because so many people died there, they actually had to bury them on the prison's ground. Over the years, bones of the prisoners have been found in and around the prison, so I suggest not going there unless you want to stumble upon some human remains. Coming in at number 7, we have Moundsville Prison. Moundsville, West Virginia Penitentiary was built in 1876. bricks, and it looks a lot like a medieval fortress. But this prison wasn't designed to hold a lot of inmates. They each were meant to have their own 5-foot by 7-foot cell. That's extremely small, but eventually overcrowding became an issue, and up to 3 inmates were placed in one cell. 2 were on super small bunk beds, while the others slept on a mattress on the floor by the toilet. The conditions weren't the best, that's for sure. Before the prison was abandoned in 1995, a lot of death sentences were carried out there. 85 men were hung and 9 were electrocuted. This prison saw the worst of the worst criminals. One of the more notable inmates was Harry Powers, the Lonely Hearts Killer. He would use newspaper ads to lure lonely women to him, with ads saying that he was looking for love and marriage, but instead he would rob and kill them. Now, Tom Stiles, the caretaker of the penitentiary, said that multiple inmates would complain about the prison being haunted. So even before criminals were killed there, the prison was already haunted by other spirits. Now it's even more haunted with the ghosts of the criminals as well. Making our way down the list, number 6, we have Old Essex County Jail. Located in New Jersey, this jail was built in 1937 and has a very creepy Victorian style to it. Over the time, the prison expanded and had its own cafeteria, hospital, auditorium, and gallows in the yard to hang the murderers. The prison closed in 1970 and now is deemed very unsafe to trespassers. Some of the floors are at risk for caving in at any second. Plus, the walls are now covered in creepy vandalism and graffiti. And inmates' files are now scattered all over the floor of the auditorium, along with empty tear gas containers and shotgun shells. So what really went on in that prison? We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Wyoming Territorial Prison. Built in 1872, this prison is one of the oldest buildings in Wyoming. From 1872 to 1890, it was a federal penitentiary, and from 1890 to 1901, it was a state prison. But this prison faced a lot of issues. The first one being that there were a lot of jailbreaks. Within the first 2 years of operation, out of the 44 prisoners there, 11 of them managed to escape. Then over the course of the next couple of years, they struggled with overcrowding. They also had to deal with a number of ghost fires. Yeah, fires would start out of nowhere in the prison. Over the years, the prison was used less and less, and actually was under capacity. At one point, they only had 3 prisoners. Now, the prison was famous for housing the murderer Julius Greenwald, who is said to haunt the area. In fact, he was known for being really good at rolling cigars. And if you visit the prison today, the faint smell of his cigar smoke will follow you around. Moving on at number 4, we have the Garcia Moreno Prison. Located in Ecuador, this abandoned prison is nightmare fuel. Inside of the prison, there are a bunch of haunting images that the inmates left behind. So to pass time, they would make murals or sketches on the walls. Most of them are pretty dark and gruesome, showcasing their misery from being locked up. So originally this prison was built to only hold 300 inmates, but it reached 8 times its capacity, squeezing inmates inside. They weren't living in the best conditions, and by taking a tour of the area, you can see it for yourself firsthand, if you dare. I don't recommend it. In our 3rd spot, we have Alcatraz. Of course, this is probably one of the most famous prisons in the world. Alcatraz was a maximum security federal prison built from 1910 to 1912. It first served as a prison for military prisoners, but over the years, it was known to be home of the biggest and baddest criminals. It was also known as being an inescapable prison, but the prison closed in 1963 since it was getting too costly to run. Now it's rumored to be very haunted. Apparently, prisoners were often tortured there by guards with chains, knives, and tasers. Lots of prisoners actually died while locked up there. Legend goes that if you visit the prison, you will be able to hear the sounds of endless weeping and screams. Others have reported hearing music coming from one of the cells, and even got locked in a cell by a trickster ghost. So yeah, definitely do not recommend you visit this prison unless you want to end up behind bars. Literally. Coming in at number 2, we have Port Arthur Prison. Built in 1833, Port Arthur Prison was referred to as Australia's Alcatraz. It was deemed inescapable, and it was known to house only the biggest and baddest criminals. From 1833 to 1853, Port Arthur was a place for convicted British criminals. Rumor has it that these prisoners were psychologically tortured there. It operated under the principle of isolation, silence, and control. As a result, a lot of prisoners were driven mad in solitary confinement. The prison was shut down in 1877, and then in 1895 and 1897, devastating fires destroyed some of the prison. Here's the thing, the prison and the entire land is said to be cursed. In 1997, a man named Martin Bryant killed 35 people and wounded 23 more on the land. This massacre is considered the worst massacre in the modern history of Australia. As a result, the prison and the surrounding area is pretty much abandoned. And in our number 1 spot, we have Holmesburg Prison. The Holmesburg Prison opened in 1896 and was nicknamed the Terror Dome, and you'll understand why shortly. Tons of very horrific incidents occurred at this prison. From 1938, half of the prisoners went on a hunger strike because of complaints about the food. As punishment, the leaders of the strike were taken to a building that had several cells lined with radiators and steam pipes. The windows and air ducts were closed off, and they raised the temperatures in the building to nearly 200 degrees. This happened during an August heat wave. As a result, several of the prisoners died from being boiled alive. Others suffered from horrific burns. But that's not all. One of the prison doctors would conduct unethical experiments on the prisoners, exposing them to herpes, radiation, psychoactive drugs, and more. Then in 1970, a riot took place in the prison. The inmates were armed with meat cleavers, knives, and makeshift pitchforks. They then went around trashing the dining hall and killing each other. Then in 1973, the prison's warden and the deputy were stabbed to death by the inmates. Finally, the prison closed in 1995, and due to its horrific past, no one wants to visit there.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Mornak Ship Graveyard in Uzbekistan. This ship graveyard showcases the destructive power that man can have on his environment. This area used to be lush with life, and it was home to the Aral Sea. This was a massive salt lake that housed one of the most diverse ecosystems in the world. It was teeming with life not just below the surface but above it as well. There were thousands of people that called the borders of this sea home. It was where people would fish and live. An entire industry was built around this lake, but when the government wanted to use the waters to expand the agriculture influence in the area, they started to funnel water out of the lake through the man-made rivers, and slowly but surely they shrank down the sea and the salt levels skyrocketed. It was eventually too salty for anything to live in the lake. Eventually everything died off, and everyone who used to live around there had to find other means of survival. Now the whole area is a desert that houses the rusted remains of ships that once traveled the Aral Sea. Coming in at number 9, we have Miss World Discoverer Solomon Island. This is the worst nightmare for every single retired person who loves to spend their time going on cruises. In the 70s, the Miss World Discoverer was working as a cruise ship, and while swooping by the Solomon Island, the captain made a huge mistake. He came too close to the island's shore and hit a massive rock which pierced through the hull of the ship. So what happened to the 2,000 people that were on board the ship? Well, they were all eaten by sharks, and now the place is called the Shark Graveyard. I'm just kidding, that didn't actually happen at all. Actually, not a single person died. Everyone on board managed to make it to the lifeboats. They made it to the shore of the island, and then the island had an operating ferry for tourists to visit. This was all very convenient. So it took a few trips, but they were all able to make it home safely. Coming in at number 8, we have the Mediterranean Sky in Greece. Let's go over to a massive cruise liner that was built all the way back in the 50s. I'm not sure how long a boat is good for, but it would weird me out knowing that you're setting sail on something that is older than my parents. I think when I'm putting my faith in something that's supposed to take me across the ocean, I want to make sure that the blueprints have the latest updates. But even though this ship had a long career, it never saw any problems. The reason that it became a wreck was actually due to lack of use. It was sitting in a Greek harbor for over 2 years, and then one day the ship started to take on water. I don't know if you guys know this about boats, but that is very bad? Well, the owners of the boat didn't have the means to fix it, but they also didn't want to lose it to the murky depths of Davy Jones' locker. So they managed to get the boat to some shallow waters and they got it stuck on land. It stayed there for a time until the boat broke open, and then it was laid there as a wreck. It's now a tourist attraction. I'm kind of realizing that going to see a giant shipwreck is like going to check out a big piece of garbage, but I still want to go for some reason. Coming in at number 7, we have the Bessie White from Fire Island, New York. That sounds like the most brutal place to be shipwrecked. Fire Island? It sounds like there would be an active volcano there and a bunch of locals there that want to tie you up and take you to the mouth of the volcano so they can sacrifice you. But it turns out it's actually a pretty peaceful place. The Bessie White was an old schooner that was mainly used to haul coal throughout America. It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. The ship crashed off the coast of the island in the 20s, and a pretty penny worth of coal was lost to the world, and I bet a bunch of people were fired that day. You don't make a 6-figure mistake and then just walk into work the next day like nothing happened. For a long time, the boat was gone to the world, but the changing shorelines revealed where it was left. You can go visit the boat whenever you want, but you just have to make it to Fire Island, so that might be a pass for me. Next on the list, we have the SS Maheo on Fraser Island, Australia. This ship was originally a Navy ship, but it came in contact with a very intense cyclone, and now it sits on the shore of Fraser Island. The metal skeleton sits on the beach and looks just as dangerous as it is. Some people think that it would be a good idea to climb and enter the wreckage, and many of them learn quickly that there's nothing in there but pain. Many people have hurt themselves in the wreckage of the ship trying to get too close for photo ops or the perfect selfie. And it doesn't help that Fraser Island is already known for being dangerous from the aggressive wildlife that lives on the island. So if you go there for a visit, try not to draw blood while you explore. You don't want a pack of dingoes to be the last thing you see. Next on the list is the USTA Liberty in Bali, Indonesia. Now we're finally getting to a battleship. The USTA was smashed in the hull by a Japanese torpedo in 1942 just off the coast of Bali. It was extremely close to the shore, only 30 meters away, so most of the men on board were able to abandon ship and swim to the shore. And even though the ship has a dark past, it is now a prime time location for snorkeling and freediving. The wreck is only 9 meters underwater, so you can swim right out to it and dive down to find a wide array of sea life living on it. That's not a bad way to spend your afternoon, just have to forget that it's down there because of World War II. Coming in at number 4, we have the AA Airfield. At first glance, this ship looks like it was set up for an apocalypse movie, but you will quickly learn that it's actually just one of the most beautiful wrecks ever. It's just off the coast of Australia, and even though the ship is a giant hunk of dead metal, life has chosen it as a spot to create. There are trees growing out through the hull of this dead ship. They reach out through the top of the wreckage. Something that used to be a giant hunk of garbage has now become a marine and vegetation sanctuary. Coming in next on the list, we have the SS Thistlegrom in the Red Sea, Egypt. One of the most famous wrecks in the world. The SS Thistlegrom was doing its duty in World War II when it was shot down and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. But being a casualty of war was not what makes this ship so interesting. It's everything that was on board. Taking a dive down to this wreck is like stepping into a time machine. Old rifles, motorcycles, and army supplies are all stuffed away inside this wreckage. Some people say that salvaging some of the goods could be worth thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the wreck is now a protected reef, so there's no way you can bring that stuff back to the surface without breaking the law. It's all looking and no touching. We have the MV Panagotis in Zakynthos Island, Greece. I can't believe it took us this long, but we finally made it to a pirate shipwreck. It's not an old school pirate shipwreck that has black sails and a bunch of scurvy-ridden hooligans who are constantly drunk on rum. No, this pirate ship was operating back in the 80s. It would come to a place known as Smuggler's Cove. This is considered the most beautiful beach in all of Greece. The waters are crystal clear, and the only way you can get there is by boat unless you can swim like Aquaman. This is why it was such a hot spot for smugglers to bring goods in and out of Greece. Well, one day the captain of the Panagotis was feeling a little bit bold and he brought the ship in way too close and it hit land. The crew did what they could to try and get the boat loose, but there was nothing they could do. It now sits on the shore of the beach as an added tourist attraction. And number 1 on the list is the SS Yonglanga, Queensland, Australia. Alright, grab your scuba gear because you're going to need to head underwater for this next wreck. If you want to visit this one, you're going to need your PADI certification because there is no way you're going to get face to face with this wreck unless you got a scuba tank or some serious freediving lungs. When the Yolanga went down, it was not a pretty sight. It was actually a tragedy and a very scary one at that. A cyclone came through when the boat was out at sea, and even though they had a skilled crew, nothing could handle the massive swells that were thrown at them. The ship was ripped down underwater and 122 people died in the wreck. On the bright side, the wreck is now teeming with life. In the 109 years that the ship has been sitting at the bottom of the ocean, it has collected a ton of coral and marine life that call it home. This place is a scuba paradise. You can see everything from octopuses, manta rays, sea turtles, to tiger sharks. Not to mention the whole wreck is covered head to toe in coral. Some say it is the most beautiful sunken ship in the world.
At number 10, we have Glendale Hospital. Now this hospital was one built in the 30s to help deal with the tuberculosis epidemic. The building was used in other ways as well until its closure in 1982 because of the high levels of asbestos in the building. Today, police patrol for trespassers, but that doesn't stop graffiti artists, curious teens, and ghost hunters from exploring the abandoned hospital. One local urban legend is that if you sneak inside the hospital, you will be chased by the ghosts of the patients who passed away in the building. A local resident said, "My friend went there and swears he saw a ghost watching him from the shadows. And after that, he won't go near that place anymore." Also, a group that went in to explore heard whispered responses to their questions through EVP, and they also heard thuds and bells. Lastly, they caught light anomalies on camera, and they said they couldn't really debunk them as being dust or bugs. On to number 9, Old Tool Hospital. This is also known as Asylum 49 because this old home for nursing and other things also is part-time an attraction. Nurses that used to work there claim that 3 different ghosts lived there as well: a nurse in white, a man in black, and a little girl. The nurse in white became known when nurses would visit patients who said they had already been visited by a nurse in white already, but there was no nurse that wore white at the nursing home. Next, the man in black was said to be a terrifying apparition that manifested at 3 in the morning. And lastly, there was a little girl that would show up when patients were soon to die. Children's laughter could be heard in the halls, and that tended to be a sign that patients would pass away soon. This pattern of 3 mirrors the rumor that patients died in groups of 3 at the now abandoned hospital. So, while ghost tours are available, be warned. The spirits there are said to scratch visitors or even call out to them by name. Number 8. Seaside Sanatorium. This fortress made of brick was designed in 1934 by architect Cass Gilbert. I mention this because it used Tudor Revival architecture, essentially massive terraces facing the sea that wrap around the main building, aiming to help get children that were there get more sun. As I mentioned before, that was a main method of treatment for TB at one point. Now, once treatments for TB improved, the use of the building changed. After being a sanatorium, it was a home for the elderly, and then a traditional medical hospital, and then lastly, a hospital for intellectually disabled people. Sadly, in its final form, the hospital staff were frequently accused of abusing patients, and the hospital became known for its high mortality rate. It closed in 1996. Now, the abandoned hospital is home to persistent rumors of paranormal activity. Teams that have investigated have caught different EVPs of children's laughter or spirit orb photographs. Some claim to see objects moving of their own accord or swing sets that appear to be in use when no one's on them. On to number 7, the McRaven House. So this one was built way back in 1797 in Mississippi, and the McRaven House has been called a time capsule of the South. There were expansions to the house in 1836 and 1849, but each edition left the initial construction untouched. So this house makes our list because it was a Confederate field hospital during the Civil War, and several residents passed away within the home. The former owner of the residence, John Bob, was murdered just outside the premises. But the most active spirit that haunts the house is said to be Mary Elizabeth Howard. She was originally the lady of the house. She died in 1836, shortly after giving birth in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Her presence is rumored to be behind a bedside lamp in her old room turning on and off, unexpectedly and just any time. Number 6, Rock Haven Sanitarium. This sanitarium opened in the 1920s and was one of the first to try kinder alternatives to the treatments that were given at the time. It was a woman's only asylum during a time when men could plead a woman's insanity during a divorce with little to no evidence. Obviously, a lot of people were sent to different asylums that were using much worse treatments, but those 2 reasons made this asylum very ahead of its time. So Rock Haven was bought by the city of Glendale in 2008, but it is essentially abandoned. Those who guard or take care of the property have reported unusual encounters though. They say they have seen lights switching on, clocks changing time, figures passing in front of windows, disembodied voices, knocking on the walls, and items appearing out of nowhere. The biggest item that has appeared out of nowhere is, amazingly, a piano. Before then, it was only seen in vintage photographs, but then there. One local historian gives tours of the property every once in a while, and he says that the hauntings are borderline pleasant. Must have been because it was a nicer asylum. Haunted though, nonetheless. On to number 5, St. Ignatius Hospital. The St. Ignatius Hospital operated from 1893 to 1964. It was a private hospital that struggled financially until it closed down. It was sold in 1968 and used as an assisted living facility. It was officially shut down and abandoned in 2000. Today, it is said that the ghosts of the former patients have reclaimed the halls of the hospital. One of the main ghosts is believed to be F.E. Martin, the hospital's first fatality. He unfortunately died after being crushed between 2 railroad cars. People who dare to visit have reported hearing strange growls and being attacked by unseen hands. At number 4, Central State Psychiatric Hospital. So this hospital originally opened in 1842 as Georgia State Lunatic, Idiot, and Epileptic Asylum. It was the first public psychiatric hospital in Georgia. A century after it opened, it swelled to 200 buildings across 2,000 acres. At its peak, it housed up to 13,000 patients. The treatments of the time are appalling. Lobotomies, electroshock therapy, straitjackets, and even children being confined to cages were methods used at the hospital. With the large numbers it housed and the mass graves nearby, it is no wonder that people have had paranormal experiences there. People report voices or strange sightings close to the graves where over 25,000 people are buried. The sightings are typically said to be simple visual anomalies, but golfers from nearby have also reported hearing screams from within the abandoned buildings. Additionally, passerby have felt strange as they come near the buildings with feelings they can't really explain. Number 3, Fairfield Hills State Hospital. This hospital opened in 1931 as a hospital to accommodate the overflow of patients from other nearby mental hospitals. Like other psychiatric hospitals we have talked about, the patients were treated harshly at the time. Until it was closed in 1995, the halls of the hospital were filled with stories of abuse, electroshock therapy, invasive experimental surgeries, suicides, and mysterious deaths. Eyewitnesses claim to have experienced hauntings within the walls. They have seen a dark, shadowy figure rounding corners quickly and have felt like they have eyes watching them. When they go to investigate, the figure had disappeared. Now the hospital is heavily guarded and trespassers are not welcome, so who knows what's going on inside. And number 2 is the Coon Memorial State Hospital. So the history of this hospital starts back in 1830. It was the Vicksburg, Mississippi hospital treating patients mainly diagnosed with smallpox. The hospital also served the wounded during the Civil War. It officially closed its doors in 1989, and although the new owners boarded up the property in the early 90s, trespassers quickly made their way into the buildings. Paranormal investigation groups have reported seeing full body apparitions and shadow figures roaming the building. They say you feel the presence of the past patients of the building as well. Many visitors also say they have heard the usual bangs, bumps, and footsteps commonly heard in spirited destinations. It is also known far and wide as a hotspot for paranormal activity, with groups that investigate apparitions and EVPs recorded there. While one group of ghost hunters were exploring the abandoned Coon Memorial State Hospital, they found the body of a missing woman. Lastly, number 1, Oklahoma Tuberculosis Sanatorium. The Eastern Oklahoma Tuberculosis Sanatorium was built in 1921 to care for patients with the disease. It was closed down in 1975 from a declining need for the facility, in part due to the new advancements and treatments. It is believed to be haunted by the spirits of the children who died while being treated. One Native American woman who was admitted to the sanatorium as a teenager lost many of her friends there. She remembers a moment when the janitor there, who also worked as a gravedigger, pointed to her and asked, "When will I be coming to you?" Also, during author Cheryl Pearson's research on the history of the sanatorium, she found out very disturbing information. Native American children used to be tested on for cures to tuberculosis at this hospital, most likely so cures for white children could be found. Those children who were tested on are believed to be the ones who haunt the abandoned ruins to this day.
Number 10 with the Haunted Mansion. This abandoned mansion is located in Brush Park, Michigan. Back in 1941, it was used as an upscale brothel, but years after it was initially opened, a ton of dead bodies were found in the cellar of the mansion. All of the dead bodies were marked with a perfect circle on their torso and chest areas. The murderer was never found, and no one knows why they committed these gruesome murders. All we know for certain is that this mansion is full of angry spirits, and anyone who steps foot in this abandoned mansion will have a pretty rude awakening. But of course, people don't listen to the warnings, and they decide to check out the haunted mansion for themselves. Once they got inside, they reported feeling a cold chill brush over them. They said that they can hear screams coming from the basement and weird footsteps coming towards them. Take my advice and never visit the haunted mansion. If you do, I'm sure you'll instantly regret it. You'll go in there and you'll be like, is this real life right now? And for you guys older fans watching this video, I think that's a drink. I think that's a shot for you guys. I don't know, you you guys kill for the game, and I'm just here to make it more fun. The Nova House creeps onto this list at number 9. A man named Benjamin Albright accidentally shot and killed his son in 1958 in this house. He was filled with grief and regret, so he decided to kill his wife and then kill himself. I'm not sure how you accidentally kill your son, and I don't know why he thought that killing his wife would improve the situation. But since these brutal murders, the home came abandoned ever since. But if you were to visit this house, you would see that some of the family stuff is still inside. But I think I have better things to do with my time, than to explore a decrepit house where a family was killed. But that's just me. And of course, there are people on YouTube who thought it would be a good idea to look inside for themselves.
Then from down below. Lot of debris from this ceiling. There's room number 2. Ooh.
Number 8 brings us to Zhi UFO houses in Taiwan. These strange looking houses were originally intended to be used as a vacation resort, but this idea quickly failed. Several car accidents, deaths, and even suicides happened in this location during construction, so this project was never completed. There have been a lot of ghost sightings, and locals say that these UFO houses are extremely haunted. No one should ever go inside these buildings, because if you do, you will never be the same when you leave, if you leave. But of course, people don't listen to these cautionary tales, and they decide to do some exploring of their own. Some people even believe that these houses belong to the spirits that haunt this area, and many of them are evil and have a lot of unfinished business to take care of. Number 7, the Willard Asylum. The Willard Asylum was called an asylum because it was more like a prison. Patients were kept until the staff decided that they can leave. And sadly, many of them, well, they never left. They were never released. During that time, mental health was not understood very well. Some of the people who were locked inside weren't actually insane. If I was in there, I would definitely become insane. More than half of the 50,000 patients that came to the Willard Asylum died within its walls. And this is what makes the old abandoned buildings so creepy. In 1995, hundreds of suitcases were found in the attic, and they belonged to the patients who never left. As it turns out, these suitcases were stowed away and forgotten about for decades. It's sort of a creepy reminder of all the former patients that were locked away and forgotten about, by the outside world. That gives me the creep, so let's move on. Miranda Castle climbs up this list at number 6. During World War II, the Miranda Castle was used as an orphanage, but it was abandoned in 1980, and since then, it has been decaying ever since. It's extremely popular with ghost hunters because of its gruesome and dark past. The architect died while it was under construction, and his death still remains as a mystery. A devastating fire broke out, and it damaged a major portion of the roof and other parts of the castle, and no one knows how the fire started. A violent storm hit the castle in 2006, which caused further damage to the property. And now teenage delinquents, homeless people, paranormal hunters, I'm sure some YouTubers, and Satanists frequently explore this decrepit building. I think knowing that Satanists are coming here to perform their rituals is scary enough for me. I wouldn't go anywhere near this building even if you paid me, unless it was like 30 grand. I think I'd do it for 30 grand. Next up, number 5, we have the haunted vicarage in Sweden. This might look like an innocent farmhouse, but trust me, it has a dark past. Or it wouldn't have been on this list. It was built in 1876, and ever since then, it had been known to be an extremely haunted house. Many people who've been inside claim that they've seen the ghost of a woman in the house, and paranormal activities happen all the time. In 1941, a woman who visited this house woke up at night and realized that she wasn't alone. 3 old women were sitting in her room staring at her in the dark. Once they turned on the light, the 3 ghosts were still there, but they were extremely blurry. And in 1945, a man bought a rocking chair and brought it inside. However, he was never able to sit on it because it was thrown out of the window by an aggressive invisible force. But despite all of these scary stories, all of these poor souls decided to go inside of this creepy building anyways.
Vill du hjälpa oss med det igen? Kan du sätta dig ner på soffan och få den där speldosan att spela igen?
I don't don't know what was making that sound, but I know I wouldn't be sticking around long enough to find out. I mean, I'm not that curious. The axe murder house in Iowa slashes its way in at number 4. On the night of June 10th, 1912, 6 members of the Moore family and 2 house guests were found bludgeoned to death inside of this creepy house. All 8 of the victims had evidence that they were struck with an axe. A long investigation was done, but after 2 trials, the crime still remains unsolved, and no one knows who this axe murderer is. But now, for a small fee, well, you could choose between a range of daylight and overnight tours. So yeah, you can visit this murder house, but I don't see why anyone would want to. It's so weird that we are commercializing a gruesome murder in an abandoned house. We should all just let them rest in peace, but some sick person is cashing in some serious money. So I guess we should take a look inside from the comfort of our own house to, let's check out what the hype's all about.
It was his superstition that if you did something evil and you knew it was evil, you couldn't look at yourself in a mirror.
Takes us to number 2. This creepy house is located in Gloucestershire, England. And let me know if I pronounced that right. I don't know how you're gonna tell me if I pronounced it right in the comment section below. Well, the owner claims that it is one of the most haunted places on earth. A lot of scary paranormal stuff goes on inside of these walls. People have reported seeing lights flickering and ghostly figures walking around the inn. A local legend says that the paranormal power comes from the center of the stone hedge, and it's actually fueling this place with spiritual energy. There's also a pagan burial ground that is located beneath this inn that makes this place just 100 times more creepy. Oh, and I forgot to mention that this place is supposedly haunted with evil demons that are just waiting to take your soul. And now, topping our list at number 1, we have the Monte Cristo Homestead, which is located in New South Wales, Australia. This place is known as the most haunted house in Australia because there are hundreds of creepy reports each year. Strange lights, creepy ghosts, slamming doors, unexplained animal mutilations, and weird sounds are just a few things you can expect to see when you visit the Monte Cristo house. Several brutal murders occurred in this house, and to top it all off, it used to be a prison for a mentally impaired man. But wait, there's more. While it was in operation, a pregnant woman was pushed over a balcony, a baby was thrown down the stairs, and a stable boy was burned to death while he was sleeping. Is this real life right now? It is said that if you take pictures here, ghosts will appear in your photo, and it feels like someone, or I should say something, is watching you. You will also feel hands touching you and strange footsteps. Yeah, no thanks, not for this brown guy. I think I value my life way too much to ever visit this creepy house.